I want to start off by asking you a question, and the question is this: have you ever been part of a team that really worked well together? It may be a sports team, it may be a work team, a project team, whatever it might be. There's this acronym for team. I think we have a slide. It's together everyone achieves more, or teamwork makes the dream work. That's one that I've recently heard and really love. And so it's nice to think about team in that way, and hopefully you have experienced that. Now, it is football season. Some of you are fully aware of that, and others of you are like, football, it's always in season, different kind of football. So my three boys play football, and I coach Elijah's 13U team. So you will see pictures and videos every Saturday of two things: weddings and football. And so that's part of the big season of my life right now. And I love football for many reasons, but the reason why I love it most is I think that football is the ultimate team sport. So there are 11 players on one side, and there are 11 players on the other side. It's called offense and defense. And so at any given point in time, there are 22 players on the team. I won't get more complicated than that, because I can only imagine coming from a different country and trying to figure out football. It is very complex. I played football, and I've been coaching football for a number of years, and I coach with a couple of three guys that play Division I football, and they get into stuff that's way over my head, and I've been like born and bred in football. So it is a complicated sport. Bill Belichick. Now, I am a Washington Redskin football fan. I will be at the game tonight cheering, losing every last bit of voice that I have tonight. So hail to the Redskins. Don't hold that against me. But let's talk about Bill Belichick for a minute. I'm not endorsing the New England Patriots or any. I don't know. Do we have any Patriot fans? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hey, be loud and proud. I mean, whatever. So he's the head coach of the New England Patriots, and arguably one of, if not the greatest, not just football coaches, but coaches of all time. And he's famous for saying this: simple leadership. Do your job. Yesterday, before our 13-year-old team took the field, I'm out there looking each one of them in the eyes. Just do your job. Do your job. This is what you've prepared for. This is what all those August practices, this is what all the training comes. Just do your job. Don't try to trust the guy next to you, or girl. Ephraim has a girl on the team. Actually, she scored a touchdown. Can you imagine? I was talking to her dad afterwards, and we know them for many years. And she did not score a touchdown against girls. She scored a touchdown against the team with 11 boys on the field. She will never, ever in her life forget that. It was really amazing. And her brother's like a big-time, star at the high school. So when everyone does their job, right? So going back to Bill Belichick, when everybody does their job, so the mantra, do your job, when everybody does their job, the team has the greatest potential to win, right? I say that all the time to my players. Look, you do your best. We're trying to get you in the position so you can do your best. And when you do your best, and you and you and you and you and all 11, in our case 20 players do their best, then the team has the greatest potential to win. Now, because Coach Belichick gets the team to buy into that, the Patriots are one of the winningest teams in NFL history, with 14 AFC championships, 7 trips to the Super Bowl, and 5 Super Bowl wins. At least the Redskins have history. Okay, we've got a few of those. They're a little older. Now, from youth league through high school, I played running back, right? So I was the guy who had the ball in my hands and had the opportunity to get to the end zone. A lot of times that gets more flair. But you know how important it is, if you know anything about football, those other 10 guys got to do their job in order for me to get to the end zone. So no matter how good or fast I was, and I wasn't the greatest or the fastest, few folks called me Fast Eddie, but just call me Pastor Ed. But my success was always contingent on the offensive line in particular doing their job, opening up those holes so that I could get to the end zone, right? I remember one game in particular, my senior year. And I played for the Sprayberry Yellow Jackets. All right, I moved in the middle of my 10th grade year. I played Watkins Mill. Senior year, they won the state championship. But was I on that team? Do I have a ring? No, because I moved to Atlanta to play for the Sprayberry Yellow Jackets, in which we had massive crowds of 3,000 to 5,000 people, but we weren't really that good. Anyway, so I played for the Sprayberry Yellow Jackets. We were playing our home team rival, the Lassiter Trojans. And I remember play after play, here I am, back there, and, hike. And it seemed like before I would take a step, these 300-pound linemen would be in my face, absolutely crushing me. I remember watching tape of this. I do vividly remember I came across to block the end, and he was just right there, this giant of a man. And man, I just laid into him, and he didn't move, but it was a perfect block because the halfback, went and had a big play. That was like my big play in the game, Our offensive linemen averaged 210 pounds. Their defensive lineman, every single one of them was over 300, like legitimately. And so they beat us. It was tight there for a while, but after about 5 minutes, it was a blowout. It was 52-6. They went on to represent the region in the state playoffs and so on and so forth. Now the church, we need to move on, right? But the church is a lot like a football team. It's the ultimate team sport, right? Everyone has to play. Everyone has to do their job for us to all succeed. And here at Restoration Church, we say, when everyone plays, everyone wins. Truly, it is such a great analogy in Scripture. So a couple of illustrations of that. There are all kinds of sizes and shapes. So we use the acronym SHAPE. We have a SHAPE assessment. It stands for spiritual gifts. We all have different spiritual gifts. Heart passions. We have different passions. A is abilities. We all have different, just natural God-given abilities. We all have different personalities. Some are quiet, some are loud, introvert, extrovert, all kinds of different things. And E is experiences. We all have all kinds of different experiences that make us who we are. And that's true on a football field as well. We have owners, right? So in football, Dan Snyder's the owner. One of the coaches on my team is his personal security guard during games, and he comes back with all kinds of cool stories and brings us, programs and everything. Well, in the church, it's similar. I own the church. Of course not. You ought to hang any pastor that ever says that. Jesus is the head of the church. He is the owner. This is we sang about the blood of Jesus, right? He paid for the church in his blood. Dan Snyder paid $1 billion. It was just under $1 billion back then, but to own the football team, the church was bought with Jesus' sacrifice for us. He's the owner. He's the boss. He's the head of the church. We have coaches, okay? Pastors would consider this like coaches, but we're like player coaches. We're not really the boss. But in both cases, we're trying to get the team in the greatest position so that we can all experience success for us, fulfilling the mission that Jesus has called us to. So football teams and churches also both struggle with adversity. So yesterday, this game's the worst team in the league, statistically, and they get the ball first, and they march right down the field and score a touchdown. It is 8-0. We're like 5 minutes into the game, and we are freaking out. And then we went on to score 40 unanswered, and the game ended 40-8. So it ended a little bit better, but it was a little bittersweet. They only scored one touchdown the rest of the whole season, and they scored on us. So it took us a little while to wake up. But there's adversity right in the church. We struggle to exercise teamwork because we are diverse, especially in a diverse church like ours. Now, the book of Nehemiah is about a team led by a man who loved his city. God gave him a big dream. Pastor Rod talked last week about being dream chasers. Great message to go back and listen to. A dream of restoration for a city. And with God as their source, the people came together for their city, much like God is calling us to come together for the sake of our city. So let's dive into the story where we left off last week, Nehemiah 3 and 4, and listen to what God has to say about coming together for our city. So remember where we are in the story. Nehemiah received the news that his beloved hometown, even though they had the temple rebuilt 100 years ago, they had a place of worship, the walls were still totally torn down. It was an absolute mess. The city of his family and people, the city of God's promises, has been destroyed. The temple had been rebuilt under the leadership of Ezra, but the walls were in ruins. The people were in danger as their way of life was continually threatened by their adversaries around them. Nehemiah, he hears this news, and he's brokenhearted. And he prayerfully requested of the king that he and the people be allowed to return to restore the walls. Restoration Church comes from this word. Restoration is raising up. Literally, it's a resurrection. And so the walls were broken and they were dead, if you think of it that way, and they needed to be raised up. And so the king granted Nehemiah's request, and the project was underway. So just imagine what some broken down walls all around the city. About theologians kind of don't all agree on this, but it's between 2 and 2.5 mile radius of wall. So just think about how big 2.5 miles. So let's just say 2 miles. And you have this church right in the middle, this temple. Think of the Mormon temple, around D.C., And the wall is kind of like the Beltway, although it's a lot more than 2 miles, And the wall is it's in ruins. There's piles of rubble. And yet what happens is, under Nehemiah's leadership, he gets family after family after family to just begin rebuilding your part. Just start working on your part, and we're going to work side by side, all in the rubble, and we're going to build this thing back up, and the city is going to be a fulfillment of God's promises. And so that is what happens. So what happens, we're not going to read through chapter 3, but I want you to see something. I'm going to read the first couple of verses, and I want you to see something that's really, really interesting. Here's the way the chapter begins. Eliashib, and so we were looking at for E words, and we were considering, Elijah and so on, and we thought about Eliashib, but we went with Elijah. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priest went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Imri, built next to him. And then what you see throughout this chapter, 28 times, if you read down verse 4, the next section was repaired, and next to him. And then the next verse, next to him. And then verse 7, next to him. And verse 8, next to that. They restored Jerusalem. Verse 10, adjoining to this, the son of so on, Haramath. So if you're looking for names for kids, Nehemiah chapter 3 is a great place if you're looking for something unique. Verse 10, adjoining this, and then next to him. In verse 12, they repaired the next section, and so on and so forth through this entire chapter. 25 times you have next to him or next to them or something related to that. You get the picture. They're next to each other. They're building. They're together. They're down in the pit, and they're feverishly working, trying to get this wall built. They were motivated. The people worked hard together for their city. Now, one of my Coach Choy axioms, and I say it every day in practice, and I say it before and during and after every game, is real simple. We start one way. There's only one way to start in football, and that is fast. You cannot start slow. And so what happened yesterday? We started slow. We went down 8-0. We did not start fast. You start fast, but even if that doesn't work out, you finish one way. There's only one way to finish. If you're on our team, if you're wearing that D on the side of your helmet, there's only one way to finish. And it doesn't matter if you're up 52 or down 52. You finish strong. You don't lay down. You don't quit. You go all the way until the last whistle. We were up 40-8, and we're on the 20-yard line, and you have to, once you're up 27, you have to put in second, third string, whatever, folks. And so we're going down, and it has nothing to do with the team. We weren't trying to run up the score. We didn't really care about that other team, but for the sake of these kids that were in there, we want them to have some success, especially going into this next game. So the ref turns around to us. There's about a minute left, and he says, "Do you want to kneel it down?" What do you think Coach Choy is thinking? We don't kneel it down. Now it's kind of what's the word? Kind of a sportsmanship kind of thing, right? Like, you're already up, you're blowing out, just take a knee and end the game. That's what he is saying. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? We weren't trying to run up the score or anything like that, but we were like, no, thank you. Now, we didn't score or whatever, but this kid it's his first time ever playing football, he got to get the ball. And we were just so thankful on the sideline that he didn't fumble. But he held on to the ball and he lost 2 yards, and we were like, yes, it was about that team, our team. It wasn't about the other team running up the score or anything like that. And then we said, kneel it down. We're done, kneel it down. We didn't want to get the kid hurt. But we finished strong. Nehemiah and the Jews started fast and strong. But as in most football games, and churches, they faced great opposition, strong opposition. And how Nehemiah and the Jews came together for their city encourage us to do the same. Look at this, starting Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1. When Sanballat, so this was like one of the local enemies, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates in the army of Samaria, he said, quote, "What are those feeble Jews doing?" Remember, 100 years the walls have been torn down. What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? I mean, they were feverishly working, and here they are getting made fun of because they're working so hard. Can they bring the stones back to life? Remember, what does restoration mean? Resurrection. Can they resurrect the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burned as they are? And people are being mocked because of their hard work. One of my professors from Dallas Seminary said this, quote, "Any attempt to fulfill God's desires will almost certainly draw opposition from God's enemies." So, I mean, it's one thing to get involved, and I do not mean to get into this like politically, right? It's one thing to get into, there's a lot of stuff going on related to civil rights right now, right? And the president now got involved, the NFL, and it's a whole blown out mess, right? But it is one thing to talk about injustice vaguely. Like, it's one thing to like stand up on Facebook and argue something, right? It is another thing to talk to your neighbor who is different than you and love your neighbor as yourself and get into a conversation with your neighbor that has something to do with Jesus. That is very different. And I thank God that I'm on a football team with, a whole mix of ethnicities. I coach with a fabulous African-American coach, and we talk about these things, and we're doing our best within our context, within the mission that God has called us to do something. And I'm not saying not trying to be the model citizen right here like I'm some civil rights activist that's doing something, making an impact. But this is just my place, and God's calling all of us to different places, right? To make a difference, to make an impact, to build bridges and not walls, although this story is about a wall. Hopefully the president won't start quoting from Nehemiah 3 and 4. When we start doing this, and it involves Jesus, that's when it's kind of trendy to stand up for justice today. And we got to understand why, and we got to understand that at the end of the day, the only real lasting difference is going to be built on a rock, and his name is Jesus. That foundation is not going to be shaken. Just token attempts at building bridges and kind of token justice kind of things aren't going to make a huge difference. I have to bite my tongue or cut off my fingers almost every day not to get into some Facebook argument. Just this morning, there's this another thread of, a friend of mine that, throws out the question, about this whole national anthem thing. And I was like, nope, I can't. I just can't, Not going to do any good. I don't want to get into that. I got to be where God's called me to be. Okay, enough on that. So restoration. In Gaithersburg, when you think about reconciliation, justice, beauty, and peace, that's how we define when God's bringing restoration to the city. He's doing those four things. Bringing reconciliation. He's bringing justice to injustice. He's creating beautiful things, bringing beauty, and he's bringing wholeness. That, it could be healing, physical healing. It could be restoration. Actually, old friend of mine, JL here, he's a counselor, licensed counselor, and so it could be, addictions that become healed. That's a wholeness that didn't exist before. Now, the harder we might work in one area or another, the more we might be criticized. We won't always be applauded, especially the more people hear the name of Jesus. And that was his promise. So we shouldn't be surprised. Verse 3 says this, Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, "What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall and stones." I mean, this is hilarious. Like, this could be a great movie. I mean, a fox jumping up on that wall. Hey, guys, that's good, The wolf's coming to blow it down. Dream chasers face this kind of opposition, but they press on together. I mean, I pulled the team together last night, and Coach Choy gets a little berserk sometimes. I'm not always this calm, rational pastor. Some of you don't even think I'm a calm, rational pastor, but I'm out there, I'm just going berserk. It is time to show them what we are made of, who we are. You represent you represent your family. It's time right now. And so, you can imagine, they're being yelled at, you can imagine, is that really, if a fox jumps on our wall, are we doing it right, Are we doing, you can imagine, right? Listen to the response. Nehemiah, hear us, O God, for we are despised. This is the ongoing response of Nehemiah. His first inclination is prayer, is going back to God as his source. Not dependent on the plans. They had great plans. Not depending on the effort, although they had great effort. But his first response is to go back to God. He didn't get on Twitter, didn't get on Facebook, didn't go on Instagram initially. He went to God. Listen to his prayer. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Whew, that's a heavy, imprecatory kind of prayer. It wasn't that Nehemiah was personally insulted. It wasn't that he was taking it personally that he prayed this prayer, as we often are. I often am. You said, what? You call me what? I take it personally, Nehemiah wasn't taking it personally. His heart was so broken. His vision was so clear to see his city. The city, by the way, who was promised by God to be blessed to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that it would be restored. Then he goes back to the promise of Abraham that God would bless those who blessed Abraham's descendant and curse those who cursed them. So I think that's where the prayer is going back to. God, curse them. They have cursed your people. They're cursing your people. I'm not suggesting that we should do that, but I'm just putting into the context what Nehemiah was doing. So then, as was his norm after prayer, he got back to work. So we rebuilt the wall till all of its height reached half its height. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. Verse 7, but when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, and Ammonites, there's some historical context to the conflict in the Middle East right now. And that's a sermon for another day, but there's a reason why there's conflict, and there's a reason why there will not be peace until the Prince of Peace brings it ultimately. And so we have hope for the future, but the conflict goes thousands of years. So it says, then when the gaps were closed, their enemies, were very angry. It's not new. This is not new. Verse 8, they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir trouble up against it. But, verse 9, they didn't lay down. They didn't quit. Down 8-0, they didn't give in and say, we lost. Verse 9, but we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. They had enemies north, south, east, and west. They were surrounded by enemies. But once again, they turned immediately to God as their source. So meanwhile, verse 10, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. It's tough. You start volunteering here at the school, and it sounds good. It's yeah, we're going to start mentoring kids. They're going to love us. And then you go into the classroom, and they're throwing stuff at you, and they're like, why are you here? And it takes 3 years to build a trusting relationship. And it's why am I doing this? Also, our enemies said, I'm not making this up. This is the Bible story, this really happened. Verse 11, also our enemies said, before they know it or see us, will we be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to the work? We're really in the trenches here, guys. Really get ready. This is happening. We're building the wall. They still hate us. Pick up your sword. We may be going to battle here, And the workers became discouraged by their own fatigue, the immensity of their task and the threats of their enemies. But like me stepping up and facing that 300-pound lineman. Now, I was 10 pounds less in high school, so I'm about 170. I was a whopping 160-pound fullback in my senior year of high school. I saw that chuckle, man. Yeah, I know. It was funny. It was kind of a funny sight. That's exactly what those linemen were thinking. When they see me in the background, they're like, ha, 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 ha. That's like what our enemies are. They look at the church and they're like, yeah, right, Jesus. What difference is that going to make, It's like me stepping up against that lineman coming at me. Nehemiah and the Jews faced intense oppositions. Verse 12, when the Jews lived near them, came and told us 10 times over, wherever you turn, they will attack us. It's intense. Therefore I stationed, here's the plan. Therefore I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall and the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. Say great and awesome.
Great and awesome.
Great and awesome. And fight for your families. What are we fighting for? Fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Nehemiah's increased security in God focused their attention back on him. It was that in this intense moment, he had already cultivated this close, intimate relationship with God as his heavenly Father. And as he had increased security in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as he had increased security in the promises of God, he was able to have a clear vision and point the people to God. And he was like, yo, hey, these giants are nothing. You don't forget the Lord your God, who is great and awesome. He is not weak. He's not flimsy. He's not deaf. He can hear you. Oliver Cromwell, 17th century leader of the British military, was known for saying this: trust in God and keep your gunpowder dry. Yeah, I mean, we got to trust God, but we got to work hard. That's kind of what he was saying, in the context of a military, hundreds of years ago. I mean, and those fights, man, were nasty. Ain't no laser focused. I mean, you get a big old chunk of lead coming at you, burning a hole through you. Trust in God, but keep your gunpowder dry. Yes, we pray. Yes, we need to pray more. We need to labor in prayer. I got a lot to learn about prayer. We need some prayer warriors praying for our church. So if you know some and they're willing to come on our prayer list, let us know, because we need to learn more and more about prayer and have that surround us, right? But we also need to work hard together for the restoration of our city. God doesn't just bring restoration immediately or miraculously. Does he do it sometimes immediately, miraculously? Yes, but that's not the normal way that God works. God normally works in the normal, day-to-day, mundane activities of our lives. That's how God works. Last night I'm at dinner. Our football team went after dinner. After the football game, we went out to dinner. And there's a new kid on our team. I can't imagine starting playing tackle football at 13. But William Cross White, it's kind of funny, Cross White, he's white. Anyway, it's funny. His family was talking to me afterward. We sit down, and I don't know anything about them. All I know is that mom and dad religiously watch all of practice every day, which I don't understand that. But anyway, that's cool. So they're watching, and so last night they came up to me, and they said, hey, Coach Choy, are you a minister? We're like at the table, and I'm like, yeah. So I get up and I go over to their table and we start talking, and he said, we've just been watching you, and there's just something different. You get out there and you yell at the kids and you're motivating them and teaching them, but you always seem to come back and you're putting your arm around them and you encourage them, and he said, I just want you to know that William, this has made a huge impact in William. He said, you're positive influence. And this kid, before he ever played his first tackle football game, got a concussion in practice and then lost both of his front teeth last week in practice. We weren't sure if he was going to be able to play yesterday. And so he overcame those two, concussion and losing his front teeth, getting busted out, nothing to do with football. And so he played his first tackle football game last night and did pretty well. He was nervous as all get out. What's the impact that I'm making, God is doing in William's life? It's showing up to practice every day. It's just showing up. I mean, all I do is I just show up and I do my best. And usually I walk away thinking, man, I should be doing more. I want to make a bigger impact in these kids' lives. And you know the impact that gets made? I mean, the way that God's using me? Just showing up. And sometimes that's what you got to do. You know, God is calling some of us just to show up here at Fields Road Elementary School. Some of you next Sunday just need to show up and walk around the neighborhood with Pastor Rod. Just show up. And then just keep showing up. And there's some kids here at the school that just need someone to show up. I mean, one of the reasons why I coach, I love football, but there are some men that haven't shown up in these young men's lives. And at least Coach Choy, Coach Beal, Coach Martin, and others were showing up and trying to love these kids and talking to them about life. And we let them know, hey, you got to take care of your health, your home, and school before you think about football. It is an incredible privilege that you have to come out here and even come to practice. So if you don't come to practice because you ain't healthy, or you got in trouble with your mama, or you got in trouble in school, don't even think about playing in that game. We're trying to teach these young men, like life, right? Football is great. I love it. Philippians 2:12 and 13, Paul said, work hard. Like this is the command to the church. Work hard to show the results of your salvation, that you know God. Obeying God with deep reverence and fear, for God, just listen to this, y'all. God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. In verse 20 of Nehemiah chapter 4, it ends this way. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us there. But you got a picture. They got a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. They've been working hard day and day and day and day, and they have a plan, and they've come together. They've been captured by this dream of their city. They're actively part of the restoration. They've been praying, and God's showing up and working. And Nehemiah says, in that context, our God will fight for us. Well, does that mean that God's just going to supernaturally pick up the swords and fling them around? No. But with little is much when God is in it, right? Little is much. God is not calling us to something quick and easy and painless. I wish it was. I wish it was easier. Sacrifice and discomfort are normal characteristics of the Christian life. And of church life. Discomfort is part of coming to church. Getting outside of the comfort zone is part of being part of this church. So if we want this is like such a paradox, right? Because we want it to be comfortable, we want it to be warm, we want you to come in, we want people to be loved well and greeted well and all that. But when you start getting into conversations in here, and the reality is that life is an upside down mess, it forces us. Are we going to lean in to love my neighbor as I love myself? Am I going to be willing to sacrifice some comfort to come over here? Or am I just looking to come in and go out and just check that box and feel good, right? And what God is calling us to is, there's a lot of broken people. Some of you walked in with deep, heavy burdens. There are some burdens that have become known this morning that we're aware of. And it's heavy. God is not calling us to something quick and easy. Football coaches don't call the team together at the beginning of the season and say, all right, guys, it's time to stay up late, eat whatever you want, and hey, just do your own thing till the season's over. No, of course not. We call our players to great sacrifices during the season. Take care of their health, their home, and school. Lots of sacrifice. We tell the guys, you cannot just go out, hang out, and eat out like everyone else. You can't do that. A bunch of other fools in the school, they're going to be going to do some fool things. You can't do that. Because you can't show up and say, Coach, last night I was out being a fool and I broke my toe. Like our star player did that at the beginning of the season. And thankfully he was all right. He's back. And that was a good lesson. Hey guys, you cannot do this. There's no off season though in the Christian life or in the church. There are seasons of greater intensity and sacrifice, but we're never in the off season. The Jews of Nehemiah's day were a model to us as they came together for their city. They sacrificed and they accepted discomfort for their mission. And God is calling us to that kind of sacrifice, to give everything we have to join Him in the restoration of all things. Now, as we close, check out this last picture in this part of the story. I just want to close. I want you to envision this. Verse 21, so we continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. Man, I think I'm tired sometimes. At that time, verse 22, I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night so they can serve us as guards by night and workers by day. When are they sleeping? Verse 23, neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards of me took off our clothes. Is that a good thing, bad thing? I don't know. Each had his weapon, even when we went for water. It's intense. God brought restoration to the city of Jerusalem because the people chased God's dream for the city. God's putting a dream in us of restoration of a city where people are being brought together and reconciled, where injustices are being righted, where things that are ugly are being made beautiful, where people that have those gifts of beauty and creation are unleashed in and through the church, and where there's broken hearts, they're being restored with shalom and peace. Where there are addictions, those chains are being loosed. That's just a slight bit of the vision, the dream that God's giving to us. God is bringing restoration right here into Gaithersburg, in and through our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and in our workplaces. Ephesians 3:21 says, God is able to do immeasurably beyond more than we could ask or ever even think or imagine. So let's close with this. I want to ask you kind of two closing questions. What part of the restoration dream is God giving to you for our city? And so we want to think of this in two ways. What cause or burden is God giving to you as an individual or as a family? So I already shared for me it's kind of twofold. It's marriage. So I do a lot of weddings, counseling. I meet with couples all the time. That's really my burden. That I believe the strength of the city is the strength of families, and I'm really committed to that. And I'm committed to youth in our city. And that's why I'm out there. 5 days a week, 2 hours minimum, giving a lot of time to that for the Williams. For those boys who have no man who shows up in their life. That's my mission. That may not be your cause, right? What is your cause? What aspect of reconciliation, justice, beauty, or peace is God burdening you with? And secondly, we want to call everyone to join together with the church for the cause. And right now, we want to pour as much as we can into this school. So Pastor Rod wrote this to Pastor B and I last week, and then we're gonna close here. He said this, after our meeting, this is just last week, quote, after our meeting with the PTA from this school, the doors of the school seem to be wide open for our group to get involved in a variety of ways. Mentoring, sports, big brother, big sister, special events, creation care, you name it. This could potentially provide the perfect outlet for our group to exercise their unique gifts while also supporting the mission of the church in a very targeted manner. And so there's all kinds of things that we can do right here. So think with me for a minute about the images of brokenness that come to mind when you think of 9/11. When you think of the Boston bombing at the Boston Marathon. When you think of the flood from Hurricane Harvey down in Houston. Like, you have images in your mind, right? One of the guys, the coaches, during the hurricane, he stood up he has a disaster relief business. And he stood up in front of our football team and he said, guys, this may be the last time I see you. I probably won't see you for the rest of the season, and I really don't know what's going to happen. But we're heading to Houston with all our gear, and it's been great. And yesterday, Coach Schenk was able to be with us. He's leaving again this week to go to Florida. He went right from Houston to Florida. And then, because Houston was so bad, so they went right to Florida and then they'll go right back to Houston for, he said, 6 months to 6 years. And but it was interesting. He said, I have seen people coming together like I've never seen before. Like people from all different backgrounds. Here he is coming from Damascus, Maryland, with all their gear to go down. Now, it's part of his business, but I was asking him, I said, Coach Schenk, what is this doing to you? Like, seeing all that. And he's like, man, it wrecks me all the time. He told me all the things that they're doing, all the things that their business is giving back, and they're trying to rally people together from all different backgrounds. Think of the hashtag Boston Strong. Think of the hashtag Houston Strong and the way people from all different backgrounds are coming together for their city. Wow. So let's be Gaithersburg strong. Let's be Moco strong and come together for our city. So let's all stand up. We're going to do something a little different. So we've never done this